Hello everybody and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. Hope you've had a good week. 2 nice wins for Swindon in the friendlies, which is all good. Tonight we have the pleasure of having Iffy Onuora on with us. So thank you Iffy for spending the time with us. So I'm going to bring Vic on straight away.
Good evening, Chris. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Morgan. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much indeed. The weather is not playing its summer part at the moment, but we'll get over that, I'm sure, at some point.
Yeah, I think it's just having a bit of a moment, isn't it, the last few days. So, but you've got some news about SAS?
I do indeed. SAS Travel will be back in up and running again, of course, for the start of the new season at Colchester on the 5th of August. There'll be phone bookings only tomorrow night for Colchester and Peterborough, the League Cup tie 3 days after the opening league fixture. So phone bookings only from 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And then on Thursday, phone bookings and at the county ground in person. And there you are. All the details magically appear at the bottom, phone number and everything. So if you want to go to Colchester and Peterborough, SAS Travel up and running. Phone bookings only tomorrow from 7. And then phone bookings and in person at the county ground on Thursday from 7.
Exactly, and that's what I forgot to put on the banner across there is 7 o'clock. So just remember it's 7 o'clock that they open. Okay, so let's bring Iffy on and then I will leave you. Good evening.
Good evening to you, Iffy.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good, how are you? Brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Much appreciated. Right, I'm going to go and leave you. So I'm going to leave you in Vic's capable hands. Again, if there's any questions, please leave them in the comments and we will go through them. I'll pass them through to Vic, or indeed Mark will pass them through to Vic. So I will see you all later.
Chris, thanks very much indeed, and I hope your internet gets better soon. There's nothing modern technology, Iffy. Well, that's how it is these days, isn't it? You never know.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Thank you ever so much for joining us this evening. Let me just read you this message out, which I've had from Ryan Barrett. And I hope you will get the feeling that we've had when we sort of announced that you were on. Iffy is a club legend. I have fond memories of him as a player back in the day, and he had the strength to take on management during the crazy days. I hope he knows that he was appreciated by fans. So that's the sort of tone of messages we've been getting so far. So I hope you appreciate that you're within friends at the moment.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you to that guy. I didn't catch his name. That's lovely to hear.
That was from Ryan. Right. We're going to talk about your time at Swindon, of course, primarily. But you were born in Glasgow and qualified for Scotland. Many people might not know that because, of course, you're a big Everton fan, I think it's fair to say. So, let's talk about your background. How did it all start, football, with you?
God, this could be a long one. Yeah, so I was born in Glasgow, but family left when I was quite young, 18 months. So we settled really in Liverpool. That's where I did most of my growing up. Funnily enough, Steve McMahon signed me, and Steve was a big hero of mine as an Everton fan. Not so much when he was a Liverpool player. He lost a little bit of love for him then. But certainly when he was a young Everton player, he was a big hero of mine growing up. So that's where it was, really. I grew up, siblings, brothers and sisters, single parents. Did all my growing up there. And then obviously, I think a lot of people know my entry into football is quite unusual. I went to university first, studied at Bradford University, so I didn't actually make it pro until I was 21, nearly 22. And I always said, I just needed that opportunity, not like a lot of kids, especially in Liverpool, where it's football mad. It was easy then. It's different now, I think, with the academies and the scouting network you have. But it's easy to get lost in that system as back then when I was a kid. So I was very grateful to be discovered later on, post university, and that was it. 15 years. I look at them fondly, not so much because you hit the great heights of whatever, but enjoyable, slightly different times than they are now. But made some good teammates and good fans and good appreciative times. I love my time at Swindon, I've got to say. Probably just about the right time. I was probably at the peak of my career then. Just before, I think I signed when I was just before 30th birthday, really. And, you know, you kind of work things out at that age. When you're young and you run all over the place, it's more enthusiasm, but you develop a little bit of guile and a bit of know-how. And yeah, like I said, I enjoyed my time immensely.
Is it fair to say you're an old-fashioned centre forward? I mean, you know what I mean by that. You know, you liked a bit of blood and thunder, didn't you, up front?
Oh yeah, it was very attritional then, wasn't it? You know, centre half against big centre half forward against a big centre half. No quarter asked, none given. You know, win your duel at the end of the game, win your one-on-ones. The game's become very systems based now, with different systems, very tactical. It's probably less so then, and I think the game's better. By the way, I'm never one of those who say it was better in our day. I think the game has moved on for the better. And it's a great spectacle now. But yeah, in our day, maybe the thing that I don't envy these guys is the scrutiny. We could probably just walk around and, you know, without any too much hassle nowadays. It's social media and everything. But there you go. A lot of things do change, and mostly for the better.
Well, I've got messages coming in already. Mark says, singing "I, Iffy, I." What a wonderful chap. Joe says, legend, Iffy. Remember my best scout ever. That's from Joe Prinsey. And Rob says, good evening.
Oh, yes.
There you go. Welcome back, Iffy. So, as I say, a lot of good comments coming in. So, lots of clubs before you joined Swindon. Gillingham was the club immediately before, of course. You might recognise those shirts behind me from the era in which you played in. Just put them up in your honour. So Gillingham to Swindon, you might well know the background of a bit of, how can we put this? There's a bit of an edge between Gillingham and Swindon. Did you know about that at the time?
Yeah, someone made me aware. I think it goes back to well before even my time. There's a big game. It might have even been not the playoff, but it was a big game for whatever was on it. And there was, I mean, you might have to educate me. I was aware of something that had been gone on previously, and there was an edge to all subsequent games between Gills and Swindon. But you might need to educate me a little bit more.
It was way back in the days of Ray McHale in the 1970s, etc. And it was all because of a sending off of Danny Westfield from Gillingham. It was a long-running thing, and it still goes on today. You know, that edge
really?
Between, because Gillingham and Swindon, let's be honest, it's not exactly geographically close, is it?
Yeah, it's just breaking up a little bit, but I'm getting the most of what you're saying. Yeah, that was it. There's no geography as such. I always thought when I moved to Swindon that the edge was the Oxford, the Oxford United one. That was the big derby, and to some extent Bristol City. And we had reasonable success against them in the time I was there as well. Mm. But I never worked out the Gillingham thing until I was told.
Well, Sean says, we love you, Iffy. We do, Iffy. We love you. Another chant from the town end. A top bloke and a great player under Steve McMahon. So let's talk about your debut, which is an extraordinary debut. Now, I've watched this video time and time again, and I can't work out how was Fraser Digby outside the box or inside the box. Can you... I can't work it out. Did you know at the time?
Vic, I'm not getting at all that. That's really distorted. I'm getting the gist. It was the Fraser Digby game, the QPR, was it my debut? Okay, well, I'm assuming you're asking me what my memory of it was, so let me crack on with that. So yeah, I'd signed on the Thursday, I think, and my first training session with the guys on the Friday, literally getting to know them all. George, my good friend George and Dara, who we're still friends with. He'd been injured for a lot of that season or prior to that game, but he was on his way back. So he actually ended up playing that game. He got a lot of stick, mind you, because everyone reckoned he only fancied playing when his big mate was coming with him. So he played, and me and George up front. And George was sensational for like an hour. I think he'd run out of gas, but for that hour we terrorised them. We did go a goal down. Fraser came out of his area. And you'll have to remind me of the minutes or something, but it seemed quite early on. And then they scored from And Alan McDonald, God rest his soul, went into goal and just couldn't get anything past him for the rest of the game. I think we were obviously down to 10 men. So I can't even remember how we did it. We played from 4-3-2 because me and George stayed up together. And then eventually, like I say, George, I think, hit the wall. And it took a lot for George to hit the wall. He was he was a specimen. He was quick and he could run all day. But like I say, it was his first game in months. So I think he came off after about 70 minutes, which left me on my own up front. But prior to that, yeah, I think, was the penalty saved? I can't remember. Or did they score from the penalty?
No, oh gosh, now you've got me. I can't remember that off the top of my head, but your ball, the ball was in from the left-hand side, wasn't it? And you...
Yeah. So, yeah, and I do remember the game because we got a penalty. So it might have been a question of the referee evening things up, which is what I think they do an awful lot of times. And George scored from the penalty to make it 1-1. So we were back in the game. And then, Mark Walters, and I got to know Mark and became a good friend. But I'm just learning his game. He used to chop onto his left, then chop onto his right. You're never quite sure when he was going to cross it. And I just remember gambling when he chopped onto his right and just getting across the defender. And when that happens, it's almost slow motion. All I remember is getting in front, make some contact, and the next minute the ball's found the net. I'm quite close to our away fans. They kind of run off the pitch. The QPR stewards are kind of all over the place trying to get me off, and obviously the rest of the guys joined me as well, and that was it. I still think that was early in the first half, probably 30-40 minutes in maximum. So we had to defend for the next hour or so, with our lives depending on it. And we did. We got a bit of luck, I'm sure. And like I say, Alan McDonald saved us and threw everything at him. We were down to 10 men. We fought and scrapped, and you think, wow, this is the kind of team I like. I was like that. I loved being part of a team, and I've got to say the teams I remember most fondly were those ones which had that character and a bit of spirit about them. And for that game, it was certainly all on display. And I think, given the rest of the season, it was an important win. We probably a few more results needed to secure safety. We just about got there.
I think that pretty much kept you up, that one. I don't know if you're hearing me now. You're hearing me now?
Yeah.
You okay? Yeah, good. Yeah. I think that pretty much kept you up for that season. There were more troubled times to come, of course.
Yes.
But, you instantly got a rapport with the town fans. This is from Ross. I was at his debut at QPR. First time I've ever seen us win away. Incredible match. You see, that's the thing about football, isn't it? People hinge their memories on certain moments in games. Do players do that?
I think they do, and especially significant games like that, Vic, your debuts, your first game, or, and QPR had that aspect to it. Was a really tight ground. I always liked playing at QPR for some reason. It was really tight ground. The fans are close to the pitch, and you have that intensity about you. And the great places to go and win, certainly. And away from home, I can't remember when we won a game, probably into the following season. We didn't. I don't think we won away after that. We were on the receiving end of a bit of some away. I think Norwich comes to mind. We had a bit of a hiding later on in the season. So, no, those games do stand in the memories, do stand the test of time a little bit in the memory wise, and I do remember that one very fondly.
More comments coming in. Let's have a look. I was there. Great game. Took my son Matthew, first away game. Then he was hooked. That's from Tony. Yeah, he was hooked. Poor chap. Anyway, there we go. That's how it is with football, isn't it? You go and that's it, really. These were troubled times. The point I was making when you couldn't quite hear me was I watched the video over and over again yesterday of Fraser Digby sending off, and I still can't decide whether he was out or inside the penalty area. I mean, it was very close indeed. What were the players saying on the pitch?
I can't remember. I think at that point you just know, you almost fear the worst. Excuse me. Particularly away from home, you fear the worst. And looking back, I think they had some big players like Dowie and Gallen. They were a decent team keeper at the time. Maybe a little bit punching under the weight. So I think, with those kind of players, no matter what people think, they can be influential. And I'm not saying this with any great recall, but that can influence the referee. You can tell now we do a bit of work with referees. but it can influence their fee. So if there's any measure of doubt, then you're probably always not going to get the benefit of it being the away team.
Yeah, I think you're match delegate for referees in the Premier League. Is that right?
Yes, I do. I've done it for many years now, and they're getting more and more professional. I think back in the day it was different. There were ex-referees just kind of almost waving through ex-referees. So I think the club saw it as something like a bit of an old boys network. So they brought the delegate system in, comprised of ex-players and managers like myself, to give a different lens. And we're not there to talk so much about the technicalities of the game, although we do a little bit after a while. It's more about the look and feel, giving it that, excuse me, bit more of a coach's and player's perspective. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. You take your time. Don't worry at all. That's fine.
That's better. Yeah,
yeah,
and I think it actually works quite well now. The referees have come to appreciate that different aspect that we can give them.
You've also had a role with the under-21s, of course, and what a fabulous weekend they've had.
Yeah, I was delighted. I messaged Lee. So when I was there, Lee was one of the senior coaches, with Tim Detmar, who's still there, doing a fabulous job, and Adi was the head coach at the time, Adi Boothroyd. So I did message them. I was rooting them on. It wasn't the best of games, unfortunately, on Saturday night, but I think for the country as well, for the morale of seeing that next generation, I think it was really important. When they still talk about the Germany side, who under 21s who won back in, I can't remember what year now, 2010, and then went on to win the World Cup 4 years later. So, and we are blessed, I think, with a real good crop of young players. So no, but it was an important win. I was delighted for likes of Lee and Ashley Cole and Jolien Lesker, part of the staff as well. Particularly Jolien, I got to know Jolien well. So
let's hope it does translate into senior trophies in the future, because the country, as you know, desperately wants that to happen in the near future. Well, let's talk about Swindon at the time. We should also mention your mask, because you had a fractured cheek. Now,
yes.
This was, well, you mentioned referees, so this was a rather bizarre incident. Tell us about the referee and your broken, fractured jaw. How did that come about?
Yeah, a little bit in and out, but I think I got the gist of it. It was actually in a game, so I know we all play out from the back now. It's very much the game's changed, but back when I was playing, it was still goalkeeper gets in, kicks it high, and the striker flicks it on with it, whatever. So it was one of those. I can't remember who the goalkeeper was. Was it Frank Talia? I can't remember. Someone kicked it up in the air, and I'm not watching in front of me. I've just backpedaling, looking to flick it on. The referee, and I still to this day don't understand why he was under the line of the ball. I hit him with my cheek. It wasn't my jaw, actually, it was my cheek. And I went down, and I didn't quite, I was a little bit disorientated, didn't know what had happened. And anyway, I played the rest of the game, which is probably a bit of a red flag these days. Came at the end of the game, and I do remember the rest of the game, but it was all a little bit foggy, and I was a little bit groggy. And actually, probably the most noticeable thing was someone actually picked up on me. I felt sleepy. I was doing that in the dressing room afterwards. The manager was talking about the game. I don't know whether he lost it or something. And I was just somewhere else. I was sleeping, and someone must have nudged the physio and said, "Have a look at him." So the physio came over to me and just had a look at me again. And he did that, face on look and said, "Just have a look." And he looked at me and says, "Have you always had that?" Bizarre question if you think about it. "Have you always had that dent in the side of your cheek?" I went, "No." And he went, "Okay." So I ended up going to, I think it was the hospital that evening. And I actually think I was kept in observation, or did I go home and go back? I can't remember. I mean, it's probably not a good thing to go home and go back, but I was kept in observation for some point. But long story short, next morning, I had it operated on. Spare the details for anyone who's having a late evening meal, but they actually drill into the side of your head here, and then get an instrument, basically the equivalent of pliers, and then pull the cheekbone back up and reset it. So that's what they did. Obviously, I'm out of it. I don't know anything about it, but come away. Success, get onwards, and literally after the 24 hours, I was fine. Obviously, even then, the medical advice not to play again. It wasn't too far from the end of the season, and I'm not sure they knew quite what to do. And I was fidgety a little bit. It was that first season. I was still getting my surroundings. I didn't really fancy not playing, seeing out. I mean, I think we had a good 3 or 4 games left. So, and I think I missed one game, and after that I just started getting really fidgety, and I think I must have badgered the manager, says, can I play? And I think someone else had worn a mask. It wasn't just off the top of my head, someone else at the time. I don't know whether it was another prominent player, even someone like a Klinsman at the time. Was he playing then? Might have been. Anyway, someone prominent had played with a mask.
Well,
so
didn't Gaza play with a mask for a while?
It might have been, yeah, it might have been Gaza. It might have been something presented itself, and I thought, well, he's wearing a mask, I can get a mask. So, long story short, I went to hospital in Whitechapel, London. That was a terrifying experience because it's a bit like you feel a little bit claustrophobic. They put the cast over your face and let it set, and you can't talk. Your mouth's closed. You've just got your eyes, I think, but they're submerged. So it's a bit. Anyway, they get the cast. It's quite strong, although not as strong as you would imagine. There's a little story behind that. And it was there ready for me to play. And the next game, actually, that following week, I was meant to wear it in training, I was no contact in training. Yeah, no contact in training. They wouldn't let me head any balls, anything like this. But I was straight in for the game, which was Norwich away. I remember it well. Because we went down the night before. And Brian Burrows, you remember Brian Burrows, old Swin fans. I don't know Brian. I got to know Brian very well. We worked together at the PFA for many years. Brian was messing around with the mask. We were sitting around the evening meal. Brian was messing around. The mask goes, "Oh yeah, I know someone who wore these. Who used these masks. They're really strong, aren't they?" And you can tell you can guess what's coming here. He does this a few times. It snaps. It actually snaps in half, and they are meant to be strong. And it just went quiet. And Steve McMahon is at the far end of the table. He's seen it, and he's gone absolutely crimson because we'd spent a lot of money on this mask. There's a few £100. Anyway, that wasn't the point. The fact he messed about. So we went out that evening in the evening of Norwich looking for a hardware shop that I could super glue it. And then paint it because it was flesh coloured and obviously darker skin. So I painted it dark. So it was like something from Blue Peter. It's like something from Blue Peter. I kind of super glued it, painted it, and let it set overnight. And I wore it the next game, and we got beat 4-0. So
what a fantastic story! I can just imagine going around the hardware shops in Norwich looking for. Excuse me, have you got something?
Yeah.
Incredible.
I think we got a taxi out of the hotel we were staying looking for one. Crazy.
Brilliant story. Now then, the following season, of course, not a great season, was it? I mean, what sort of state was did you have any idea about financially what the state of the club was in? Did you know about that?
Yeah, we did, to be honest, because I think even not long after. So I joined in the March of,
1998.
Yeah, March 98. Well, within a few weeks, there was a problem with payments, and the chairman at the time was a bit sheepish and said there was some problems with payments. And then, actually, he was quite open about that and said it'd be sorted. But I think it was the local press where it was said that all the players up for sale. And if you can imagine, I'd come down with my wife and children. We'd moved down to the Bristol area from Leeds where we were living. So within a kind of that timescale, moving and uprooting the family, getting them in schools, we were told that we were all up for sale. So, and then I don't know what happened. I think it was Ricky Hunt, and I think he left. I don't know whoever took over as chairman after that. We don't know. It's all a little bit, opaque really those days. He was the owner and what have I. I know the Wills family were involved, and I only got to know this afterwards when I stepped up to be manager, because there was still. I mean, that was 4 or 5 years later on when I came back as on the coaching side, and I don't think much had been changed in terms of the uncertainty around the management, around the ownership. But yeah, it was we were aware, and it never helps that. When you look at most successful teams in any division, there's a structure behind the scenes, security, everyone knows what they're doing, everyone's pulling in the right direction. The moment you have that uncertainty about wages, it always does affect things on the performance on the pitch. I think it's inevitable.
You see, this is a thing where we as fans don't quite understand, isn't it? Because we expect players to go out and perform every Saturday. But you, like everybody else, have problems with bills, things like that. And that must play on your mind.
Yeah, it does. And, you know, players, human beings like everyone else, whatever job you go in, obviously ours is the scrutiny of 3 o'clock on a Saturday, but whatever job you go in, you're going to bring yourself in, and that might be bills. You know, we weren't being paid fortunes those days, and I'm not sure it might be different now, albeit adjusting for the difference between then and now. We weren't being paid fortunes necessarily, so we did rely on bonuses and bills and regular payments. And then obviously there's normal things, your family, your children, any sickness, any issues at home. That's, you know, those things. I think it's probably more accepted now in terms of those well-being issues around players and athletes now, more so than it was. But you can guarantee you that, you know, behind the scenes at every club, there's managers and there's support staff trying to support, you know, precious cargo, as which they are, players, but precious cargo come with a range of issues every day.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you must have learned a great deal about that when you did step up to management, because as a player, you understand your problems, but of course, as a manager, you're responsible for a lot of problems, aren't you?
Yeah, and by that time, I'd done my coaching badges, I'd done all those, so I was interested in badges, but I've got to say, your coaching badges are important and massively important, but your people skills are far more important. You know, I've got to say the first thing. Hopefully, he won't mind me mentioning it, because he's been very open about his problems since. But we had a very talented player when I came back as manager called Christian Robertson. We remember him, and one of the first conversations I had with him was him. And you're trying to get a tune out of players. You're trying to, because he was a match winner if you got him right, Christian. But he came with a few issues, shall we say? And one of the first things he said to me is that, look, I've got a problem with alcohol. I need to step away for a month or so. So, you know, there's no coaching badge or manual which will tell you that. That's just something you have to deal with. I remember speaking to him and says, "Okay, do you want me to tell the players, or do you want to tell them yourself? We'll have a meeting." He said, "Will you tell them?" So we sat around, we spoke to people, all very supportive. And amongst all the things, actually, and I was just a young manager at the time. Like I say, you're going on it almost on a whim. On what's best. No one's telling you if in the event of this you need to do this. There's no manual.
No.
But I guess looking back, that would have been probably the best way to cope with that. So I'm proud of myself for doing that, and I'm proud that Chris. I haven't seen him lately, but last time I saw him, he's doing really well for himself. So I'm really pleased that he's pulled through that time in his life, which was troubling. And
well, I've got to tell
important.
you, we had Christian on this very program some time ago. And we've also spoken to him live in the Legends Lounge in Swindon, and he is extremely complimentary about you. And
That's lovely.
he says you're the person that put him on the road to recovery, because you basically asked him, "Are you okay, Christian?" And he kind of sort of shrugged it off, and then came back and said, "Actually, boss, no, I'm not." So you are, you know, he's very complimentary about your part in that particular story.
Well, that's lovely to hear, and he was a lovely guy, Chris. I know he was probably on the pitch. He was probably a young manager's nightmare, you know, because on his day he was devastating, but you're never quite sure on his day. But then you look at the human being behind it. There wasn't a bad bone in his body. I always knew that about him. He was a lovely guy, a lovely kid. Wasn't a bad bone in his body. Wanted to do well. He just had these, you know, what we call demons a little bit. So, and actually, just you saying that, and you've brought him back, and he's been the Legends Lounge, makes me feel really pleased again, because it shows that there's no revert back to a previous destructive lifestyle. He's on the straight and now, so I'm absolutely delighted to hear that.
Well, he's written a very honest book, actually, and if you ever get a chance to read it, you should do. It's the story of his struggles, really, and it's an incredible book. So, I think you should pat yourself on the back big time over that, because you did somebody a big favor. So you should be very, very proud of that.
Lovely.
Joe says, I think you saved Christian Roberts' life. You should be proud of that, of yourself. I remember that, says Joe. So there you go.
Lovely.
Let's go back to the playing times and that season. It was a season where Steve McMahon got replaced by Jimmy Quinn. You'd had a decent scoring record, I think, 7 goals in 6 successive games, something like that. And Craig Brown, who sadly left us not too long ago, you were brought to Craig Brown's attention. So there was a possibility of Scottish honours.
Yeah, I'm never quite sure about that. Actually, and God rest his soul, he passed away recently, Craig Brown. I was at a dinner with him many years after that. And I don't know whether because I was sat right near him, but he did reference that. He said, he mentioned me, and he says in his speech, and he says I should have called Iffy up. So I thought, I don't know whether he was doing it because I was there, but that was really nice for him to mention. I didn't catch all of the question because it was breaking up again, but the gist of it, I think, I started that season quite well. I scored a lot of goals before Christmas, if I remember rightly. And me and George had a good partnership. And then it was a strange one, actually. I think I got an injury either just after Christmas, and I probably stupidly, there's probably a bit of a trend that I used to try and play through injuries, which wasn't a clever thing to do. I had an ankle injury and never quite healed, and ankles can be stubborn. Because it wasn't completely debilitating, couldn't walk, well, I just assumed I could pack myself up and carry on with it, but it did affect me mobility a little bit. And then when you don't score a few games, and maybe a little bit anxious because I was aware of the possibility of maybe playing for them, for the national team. I went through a spell of not scoring for quite a few games. And unfortunately, that probably put pay to any ambitions. But there you go. I don't have regrets. And I think I did actually end up finally just squeaking over the 20 goal a season mark that year, which is always the measure for strikers. So I was doubly pleased about that.
Yeah, I was going to say that 20 goals in a season is the mark. Is it still the mark? I mean, you got Erling Haaland, for goodness sake, who's a phenomenon. Yeah. I mean, is 20 goals still the mark?
Yeah. Amongst mere mortals, 20 goals is still the accepted currency. If you're Erling Haaland, I think that's what you do in your sleep before Christmas, basically. I mean, I said this to someone else about him, traditionally, and it's not just me saying, in the Strikers Union, you should say centre forward is the hardest position on the pitch, maybe with goalkeeper. And I used to say to someone last season watching him, he's killing us all because he's making it look easy. Which he was. I did see quite a bit of him at City. I live in Manchester now, and thankfully through my work in the Premier League, got some games. I went to see him, and he doesn't need to be involved in the game. He'll just score at will. He's an absolute phenomenon.
You wouldn't want to be a defender against him, would you? Let's be honest.
Sorry?
You wouldn't want to be a defender playing against him, would you?
Oh, God, he's your worst nightmare, yeah.
Yeah. In that season, of course, which ended in relegation, there was 7-1 defeats at Nottingham Forest and things like that. I mean, they weren't very good times, were they, at Swindon? I mean, what do you remember about those pretty awful few months?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah,
You've gone quiet. Oh, yeah, there you're back.
Yeah. What do you remember of those? Go on.
Yeah, I only got the gist of it again. The 7-1 at Forest, which was a result that forced me into my bedroom and pulled the covers over me, I think, that night. I actually remember that. Funny enough, Wes Morgan, who I know very well now, if you look in the record books, and I have to my, just to kind of kill myself a bit more, he scored 2 goals that day. And I said to Wes, you've never scored 2 goals in your life. Why did you manage to score 2 goals that day? I mean, Forest, if you don't really remember that, they were a really good team.
Yeah.
They had a lot of Nathan Tyson, Junior Gogo, God rest his soul. They had a proper Gary Holt, Wes, the young Wes was there. He obviously went on to become Premier League winning captain. But they had a really good team and they were underachieving. So we played them. When they have that new manager thing where it's either a good thing or a bad thing, it was a bad thing. They'd lost, Gary Megson had been sacked or resigned or whatever a day or two before. I knew one or two of the players as well. Nicky Southall, who I knew from Gillingham days. Junior Bennett, I knew from coaching him at Walsall. And when you smell something, you walk in, the bus arrives at the City ground, and this is, obviously where they are now is where they should be, but they were in League One at the time, so they're massively punching below the weight, massive sleeping giants. But we get there, and there's a lightness about the place. It feels like the shackles are off, and I've already picked the side. I've already told what the side's going to be, and I don't really remember, and I still remember this. We tried to tighten up. We conceded quite a few goals before it came, and I was prioritised keeping a few more clean sheets, making it hard to beat. But we'd drawn a lot and not really won, so we're starting to be a bit more expansive. And we picked quite an open side for that game. Well, that was a big mistake as we called them just on that day, and every time they went forward, they could have scored. It was 7, but it could have been more than that. And it's one of them, like I said, one of them long dark nights of the soul. You get off the bus and you want to just curl up, and I did. But there you go. It's happened to better managers than me.
I remember Trevor Benjamin got his only goal for Swindon that day. At least we scored. At least we scored. Right. So you eventually go off with Ty Gooden, I think, back to Gillingham. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's a double deal.
Yes.
And you played for several clubs, including Neil Warnock at Sheffield United. How was that experience?
Well, the Gillingham experience, it might pain the Swindon fans here, given the rivalry. It was actually a really positive one. We went off in myself and Ty in the January of that year. I think we were the first signings of the millennium, actually. And we won promotion via the playoffs at Wembley, which, if you remember, was the last game. I think it was the last game or second to last game before the old Wembley was demolished. Unfortunately, I think Swindon would have gone down the other way. We'd have passed each other, unfortunately. So I had a good spell there, and I had 2.5 more years at Gillingham. Then I made the move to Sheffield United with Neil, which was a shame. I was just coming into a bit of form after that move, and I snapped my Achilles tendon. And after that, you're kind of hanging on a little bit. I think I had loan spells at Wickham and Grimsby without any distinction before finishing full circle, finishing where I started at Huddersfield.
Your Swindon coaching career then began as in the youth team, is that right? Andy King was manager. And so therefore you were in the setup. Andy King eventually departs, and then you're asked to step up to first team. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, pretty much. A guy called Jimmy Fraser had gone off to Chelsea as academy manager then. And he's still there, Jimmy, after all these years. I bumped into him not long ago. Less hair now than like a lot of us. But yeah, he's still there. So Andy King, who I knew from, he was Mansfield manager. He brought me to Mansfield. So not long after, I think I was at Walsall, he messaged me, said, we might have a little job for you if you're interested. I didn't know anything about academy then, as a pro, and certainly not someone who'd come through the academy. I didn't really have a clue. So I was very much learning on the job, and big thanks to all the academy staff at the time for helping me through it. But it was actually really eye-opening. It was probably the best thing that happened, because I could see the roots of a club from the bottom up. The under-9s, the under-10s, all the way up to the under-16s, 18s. So I was responsible for that day to day. Opening the evening, the Monday, Thursday evenings, I think it was, with all the getting to know the parents, getting to know the players, even people like Nathan Thompson. Nathan's still going strong. I remember putting him in the under-18s and being terrified because he was only 14, and I thought, God, he looks tiny compared to the rest of them. So they were nice days, and like I say, you see all the players, and I tell you what, I'd been in the job a year. I could name every kid from every age group, and quite a few of the parents as well by that stage. So they come in at 6 o'clock on a Thursday, and I go, "Hi, Jake, John. You get to know them, and I really appreciate that. And I got on well with the staff, and got to see the scouts network where they used to go and scout the kids from. So it was enjoyable, but obviously the opportunity came to step up. Sorry, and before that, I was helping my good friend Ian Warren, who we still see Ian now, assistant at Everton, my old club, and when I'm doing a game at Everton, him and Sean Dyche kind of let me come in before the game. Not with the players. Go to the manager's room and have a catch up with them before the game, which is nice. So Ian was actually the under-18s coach, but I kind of hung on around because we had some good players coming through. And it's a shame actually. I thought some of that group might have pushed on a bit more. There was Ashan Holgate. There was Ben Wells, there was Michael Pook, who had a little bit of a career, but obviously the standout one was Lucas Djukovic. So to see Lucas make his debut for me at 16 and go on to have a really good career in Birmingham for most of the year has been really nice to see. We messaged each other not long ago, actually. So it's nice to see when you see players go on and have a career, which he did. But, they were good times. I wouldn't change them.
Yeah, Ian Wone, what a player that was. Boy, that was class, wasn't it?
Well, I didn't see him play. I mean, I saw him on the TV when in his Forest days, but I didn't see him play at Town. We missed each other out. Probably would have been at, Gillingham and Sheffield United when he came into the club. But we got to know each other, became friends over those days, really, doing the 18s and what have you. So, yeah, he's a good guy, won't he? He's a good guy, and he's got a big job on at Everton, bless him.
This is from Lee Giles. My dad, Trevor, the old masseur, sends his best to Iffy.
Hello, yeah.
Yeah. And this is from Christian's book. Christian names Iffy in his acknowledgement in his book. Iffy Onuora for rescuing me from alcoholism and providing me with invaluable support after treatment. I sent him a photo of this and the book cover, so you'll get that. That's from Chris. You'll get
that's lovely.
So
I'll message you and get him.
Yeah. So how was it when you became manager? These were tough times, weren't they? I mean, this is Swindon going through one of its regular financial meltdowns. How was it?
I only caught financial meltdown there. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Can you hear me now?
Just say that again. Yeah.
Swindon were going through one of their regular financial meltdowns when you took the job. When you took the job, did you then find out how bad it was?
I got the gist of that, yeah. Well, I tell you what, no one's mentioned, which is really interesting, and I don't know how you could forget the Big Ron series.
Yeah, I was going to get on. I was going to get on.
Okay, maybe I'll leave that. But obviously, some of that was motivated. I've got to say, and I think the TV company came to us before Christmas, and basically the influence was. It's up to you, Iffy, from the hierarchy at the club. It's up to you whether you want to do it. But with Christmas on the horizon and a potential six-figure sum, you don't need to be a genius to work out that I think they were pushing for me to do it. Again, that's literally why we did it, and that gave an indication to your question, really, of the parlous nature of the finances, which they were. And you never get to look at the books completely, but they were in pretty dire straits from what I can probably appreciate. And we lost players, didn't we? We lost Rory Fallon on the deadline day. So going back to those last few games of the season, losing at Forest, Rory was a big influence in the team. While he was on the pitch, we had goals in us. We didn't quite have the same goal threat, I think, without Rory. And we'd messed around with the team. We'd try to rejiggle it. We got players like Boata, who came to us from Watford, and a couple of other players. But we never quite had a nailed on number 9 goal threat like Rory was. And I always remember selling him on the deadline day to Swansea, and he then came back to haunt us playing against us and coming on a sub or scoring against us, and that was a bitter pill to swallow.
Sure, I think that was at the Liberty, wasn't it? If I remember right, on
a
Tuesday night. Yeah. All right then. Well, let's talk about Ron Atkinson because there we go. This is from Sean. I always remember that program where you and Ron Atkinson didn't get on. You weren't a happy man when Ron was brought in for that documentary. Give us your side of that story then.
Well, it's like what I said. It's nothing is wrong. He's been a legend, of course, but I think the premise of the story was maybe a little bit of a rehabilitation job for Ron. If you remember, he'd been out of football, having said what he'd said. So it was a bit of a rehabilitation job for him. We'd met initially, and actually at first I thought, okay, this can work. We seem to be okay. And then, I don't know whether you remember, he went off on holiday for a bit, which was fine. There's no expectation that he'd be by my side every day. And we were a young staff, and I was trying to keep that tight with myself and Ian and Alan Reeves. And we're all the similar ages, so I think there was a lot to be said. And good characters. I thought we were all good characters and we could bounce off each other. So it wasn't a need for having someone of that more experience. But obviously, if he was able to input, that'd be great. But it just felt a bit contrived, the whole setup of it. And and even now, it's very rare you get dressing room access. It becomes a bit goldish, and I was very aware of, remember the Graham Taylor footage back in the day of that. So I didn't want any of that. So very much was a no-no. A red line was you're not coming in the dressing room before games or half time or afterwards. And once or twice, I've got to say, they were a bit cute. There was a microphone kind of dropping out from behind us once or twice. So we I said, that's not happening. And then, like I said, I think with Ron, it's nothing against him. Like I said, he's had a fantastic football career, but it didn't feel a right fit after all. As a fit from first saying, okay, let's do this. I think we can make it work. And obviously the money was a big influential factor as well. As it went on, I didn't think it was I think there were people, it just wasn't, it just didn't feel right. It became a bit of a circus. I always remember where we used to train at the old ICI place. It was called something different now. And we were training on the side, and I was still on the side of the pitch. And there was a corner where he'd come around the corner. He almost swept by in this long coat. It could have been a scene from Goodfellas, actually. And it came by in this long coat. He dressed immaculately, Ron. And a little bit of an entourage in the camera crew. It just felt circusy, and I didn't think I've not spoken to players about, although Alan was always uncomfortable with it, Alan Reeves. So I got the sense they weren't comfortable with it, and you got to listen to your players. So there's never a time when I said they've got to go, but I think they became aware that it wasn't really working out how they wanted it to, and then they packed off and went to Peterborough, which was another story then.
Yeah, sure. What about that season then? Unfortunately, it's not a great season, but I think every Swindon fan would recognise. Is it breaking up again, Iffy, or can you hear me all right?
It's breaking up again, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Can you got me now?
Better. Yeah.
Every Swindon fan will recognise that you did your very best in difficult circumstances. How did you see it? No.
Gone again.
How about now? Any good?
Can you try again?
Yeah. Every town fan can recognise you did your best under difficult circumstances. How were you with it?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest disappointment because, I thought we'd left a kind of squad that with a bit of recruitment we could have pushed on the following season. And actually, all the indications were, because I think our relegation was confirmed away at Bristol City on I think it was a bank holiday. And actually, Gary Johnson, the manager, didn't he paralysis Gary? For years afterwards, he'd say, what a game that was. It's just like a basketball game. You attacked, we attacked. Finished 1-1, but it could have been about 10-10. So I remember that was our relegation confirmed. I think we then went on. I just said to the players, let's be positive, let's be professional. We're all playing for our futures here. And again, it's maybe that naivety for me, but I thought we'd left enough for us to kick on, or at least to start the season and see how we got on. And it was probably more of a shock than it should have been when they told me that I think they'd had talks with Dennis Wise and he'd been shown around the ground, and then we found out kind of late on So that's disappointing, but it's football. We know what football's like. It's probably the first time, because it's gone almost unbroken from football, from right back down to my playing days. That was the first quite big long break in my career. So I'd gone 15 years playing, into a coaching job at Walsall, into the time at Swindon as academy manager, then first team manager. That was the first time when that season ended. I did think, oh my gosh, what do we do now? And that's not often kind of appreciated. I think when you've been around the block a little bit, and you kind of, whether you've got networks and you go off. I know out of work managers sometimes go off and go and study clubs abroad, or spend time, or do the media round. But unless you're at that, unless you're at that level, you kind of are stuck at home wondering what to do and getting in everyone's way. So it was a strange time. I do remember that acutely. That was the first time I thought I did have that now what moment.
Sure. You've done a variety of things, haven't you? I mean, manager of Ethiopia, for goodness sake, what's that about? You went to Ethiopia? Gone again. It's gone again.
Yeah. Sorry, I think did you say manager Ethiopia?
Yes.
You say Ethiopia, Vic?
Yeah.
I'm gonna assume you mentioned Ethiopia, because I think I caught something of it. Yeah, that was a strange one. Again, I can't remember the timeline now, because I did then go on after Swindon to go and have opportunities to coach at Gillingham and Lincoln. And so this was now, I think, 2010. Yeah, it was 2010. So it came about because I'd gone for an interview before as an academy out in Africa. Quite fancied a bit of a change of scene. And you take opportunities where you can find them. And that particular opportunity nothing came of it. But someone on the panel remembered me and stayed in touch. And then he kind of messaged me out the blue, and it really was a bit left field. Look, I might have an opportunity for you somewhere. Do you want to meet me at the Premier League, as it was then, in Gloucester Place? This is now 2010, 13 years ago. And I went there, and when I got there, there was the president of the Ethiopian FA, who was, and Ethiopia had just come back into FIFA. They'd been banned from FIFA. So they were looking for a British coach. I think they had some ties to Dave Richards from the Premier League at the time. And I kind of fitted the bill, and so I literally went over there. I went for a bit of a recce just to see what it was like. I went for the weekend, just got on a flight to Addis with my friend Dave, who was the agent who'd facilitated everything. Just got a sense of in the crowd, and went to a game at the National Stadium. The crowd were already cheering. I thought, oh, this is interesting. And what I didn't know, they'd already told me that I'd signed up and I was ready to coach. And I hadn't. I definitely had a return ticket, and I was thinking about it. So when I actually did come back, I think they were mightily relieved. But in the meantime, the president had come under attack for losing the coach. He'd come and gone really quickly when I hadn't. So just kind of anyway. So that was maybe a glimpse into some of the workings then. But I still look back on those days in terms of life lessons and experiences. A wonderful time. Saw a bit of the country. It was interesting. Most of the clubs were based in the capital, so you could watch 3 games at once if you weren't fed up by the end of it. As one game's finishing, the other 2 teams are warming up on the outside of the pitch. It was an athletic stadium, so they'd be warm, and then as soon as that game finished, the second one would go, and the third game so you keep an eye on all the players, and then occasionally you'd go out in the region. So I had a driver who became a good friend. We'd drive for like hours, and I was fascinated watching the landscape change. So it was a great life experience. Unfortunately, we couldn't manage to qualify for the Cup of Nations. We had a good win over in tiny island of Madagascar, but we couldn't beat some of the better, more established nations like Nigeria, my own place of heritage. But it was a great experience. I was there for nearly 12 months. I always remember leaving. I was in England for the start of the 2010 World Cup, the one that Spain won. By the time the final had come, I was already in Addis, and it came back something like I think the April or May of last year. I was nearly there 12 months. I was meant to be there 2 years, and they wouldn't pay me for the second year. But it's football life, isn't it?
You've done a variety of roles, haven't you? Equalities coach for the FA, is that right? You were also that?
Yeah, so where do we start? So my current role actually is the Premier League. Work for Head of Race Equality at the Premier League, working on the flagship No Room for Racism programme, which looks at coaching pathways, players, executive pathways for underrepresented groups. That's ongoing, never stops. Challenge, even things like online abuse have been at the forefront of that, and messaging around that. And even this week, so from next week, we'll start visiting the players again for the squad visits that we have every year, going to the dressing rooms or at the training grounds, speaking to them about the campaigns and how important they are to be active. They're quite a different generation now. They're more active on social media, and obviously 2020, we all know what happened there with BLM and the pandemic, and a lot of players having the voices heard. So we're just trying to support the players as much as possible and facilitating their wishes, but mindful of what the Premier League stands for and where it goes. So that's my latest role. Prior to that, I was doing a mix of that, but from a PFA perspective, the Players Union, and then as a coach as well. So I was coach education by this stage, delivering level 2s and level 3s and coaching qualifications for players. So one of the last group of players I had before left to join the Premier League was Everton. So Leighton Baines, Theo Walcott, who was there at the time, Fabian Delph, I was taking them on a course, albeit it was during the pandemic and we couldn't actually get out on the grass. We just had to do a lot of theory. But I've been very fortunate, I think, in a lot of ways. I've stayed in football for all my time with the last, since I turned pro, say for a year or two here. So I feel very blessed about that, and still enjoying my work.
Got a sporting family as well, haven't you? There's a bronze medal of the Olympics. There's an Olympic bronze medal in the family as well, isn't there?
Yes, once upon a time, when they asked about the family, they talk about me, not anymore. No, I'm very proud of her. She's my little sister, Annika. She's done great. And even more, if you ever met her, her personality is amazing. She's got this massive, big personality, and I always used to joke about her. She was on Question of Sport on nearly 3 or 4 times a series. As how are you getting these gigs? But you only have to kind of watch her in action. And I don't know whether Sue Barker took a personal liking to her, but I'd turn on the TV and Annika was on there. And at one time she let me know she was filming at Media City, so I did go down. It's not far from where I live. And I went to the green room, met Sue Barker and the captains. I think it was Phil Tufnell and Matt Dawson at the time. So I'm really proud of her. She's hung up her spikes, but she's still very active on. She did a book, a really important book, and she's gone and was nominated for William Hill Book of the Year. And she's working as a kind of athlete and ambassador for Ernest Young. So she's done amazing in her career. And like with everything, that we only have short careers, whether it's track and field in her case or football in my case. It's a really small part of your life, really, if you think about it, of your professional life. So the key is to maximise it as much as possible, and to still make a second career out of it. And she's done that as well. So I'm really proud of her for that as much as a career. We had lovely days. I remember going 2012, going to the Olympic Park to watch her. She was injured actually, but I was there on Super Saturday, I think, when her good friend and her best friend at the time, Christine Ogaruga, won the gold. Jumping, shouting in the stands. So it was, So through Annie, I've watched a bit of her friends and got some reflected glory.
Well, I'm lucky to say that I've watched her run many times at the British Championships and things like that, the London Diamond League or the Diamond League meetings. So great athlete. So what a family do. Yeah. Well, Iffy, thank you very much, Dee, for sticking with it through the sound problems as well. It's been great talking to you. And I hope you've got the feeling that you're among friends at Swindon. So whenever you come back, you're welcome.
Oh, that's lovely to hear, and I do appreciate it. It's nice you get a bit old and you don't hang on to the bitter end. But it's a reminder that there were good times. You know, there were difficulties with financially and everything, but there were good times. And I think if you ask any player, it's most about the memories you conjure up. If you're lucky enough to win medals and then bags full of cash, and good for you. But I exist for the memories and the positivity of the time, and I have lots of good memories of the time there. So, and I appreciate that. Thank you to all the town fans for reaching out.
Well, there you are, Chris. What a top man. Iffy Onuora, we're very pleased to have had him on. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And I expect you've made a lot of long lifetime friends as well through football, it sounds like, with your contacts and things. So you still keep in touch with George and stuff. So that's lovely.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. As I said before, it's a privilege to have you on here. What I will say is, if we don't go away a minute, when we go off live, just stay on for a moment so we can say goodbye informally. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. We will be back next week. We have Gerald Iffy on next week. And then the following week, we have Colin Gordon. And we may have an extended version on the 24th. So we will confirm that nearer the time. But
I was just going to say, I always remember Gerald Iffy getting sent off at Nottingham Forest on that very disappointing afternoon.
Well, I'm sure I'll come up next week then. So.
What's your memory of that, Iffy?
Did you notice me shudder when I heard the name? Listen, I've got nothing but nice things about all the players I worked for, none whatsoever. And Gerald is a young kid at the moment. He could be a little bit rash at times, and he certainly was that day. And I think he had a little bit of a brainstorm. But again, you forget these guys are only young, and at the time, you know, who amongst us in our 20s were making really good decisions, often on the pitch. So. Yeah, say hello to Gerald for me.
We will. We'll bring that up next week. I'm sure. Yeah, so we've got Gerald for next week, then Colin Gordon. And as I say, we may have an extended version. We're just crossing the I's and dotting the T's, as I say, on that one. So you've got time for a cup of tea and get yourself ready for Fools Rush In at 9. They have the lovely Aaron Oakley with them this evening. So that's one to watch as well. Okay, I think that's all from us tonight. So take care of yourselves and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.